you can feel free to turn your cameras on if you want to, but you don't have to. All right, and I see a couple more people coming in. Awesome. Well, while people trickle in, I'll just dive in. Thank you so much for joining us today for this training. The goal is for this to be super informal and hopefully really helpful for all of you. I know we just launched grants last week, so thanks for being so on top of it that you're already participating in our first training. My name is Rachel Simino, and I am on the programs team at National PTA, helping to support these grants and all of our programs. And I am joined by my awesome colleagues who will be working really directly with you throughout this process. So I am going to first hand it over to Shiny.
Oh, you're muted.
You're muted, Shiny.
Sorry, I thought I unmuted. Hello, everyone. My name's Shiny Sharma, and I am new to the PTA, the National PTA. I am the manager or one of the managers of programs and partnerships, and I will be working to support the grants process this year.
Hi, everyone. I'm Rowena. I'm also a part of the programs team, and I'm really excited to help you guys through this grant process.
And I am Zomina Howland. I'm also part of the programs team at National PTA and also very excited to be here and help guide everyone through the grants process. So with that, I will get us started. Just a few pieces of housekeeping and also going over our agenda. So this training is being recorded and the link to this training will be available over the next few days on our website, pta.org/grants. Everyone is muted. Please stay on mute until the Q&A portion, but we will be taking questions and answers. Feel free to unmute when we get there. And also feel free to join us on video if you'd like, but no pressure there as well. Feel free to add questions to the chat throughout, and we will be addressing questions at the end. And then as far as what to expect from today's training, we will be going through a walkthrough of the application itself for all of the grants and then answering any questions that come up. And with that, I will pass it over to Rowena.
So I just wanted to quickly go over the value of running our National PTA programs. I'm sure you all are familiar with our programs and how great they are. The National PTA programs are a great way to engage your community and fun and educational opportunities. And our program resources are grounded in best practices and they're really easy to use and follow. We've created our tool and toolkits to be a plug and play, so it makes it easy for your PTA to customize them. And you can tailor the programs to fit your community's needs. And one of the biggest benefits is that you don't have to reinvent the wheel. The National PTA provides you with the activities, facilitator instructions, and start to finish guides to put on a program. And then a brief overview of our grants. These grants are just meant to remove barriers for your PTA when it comes to implementing and running these programs. Our grants are supposed to be need-based, so they will be awarded to PTAs who demonstrate that they need this funding and PTAs that demonstrate how the funding will support your local community's specific needs. The deadline for these grant applications are September 27th, and that'll be at 8 p.m. and that is a hard deadline.
Awesome, thanks, Rowena. So now I am just going to walk you through the application. Hopefully some of you have had a chance to check it out. Others might just know that there's now grants open and this is your first step, which is totally awesome too. So I am going to share my screen and you all should be able to see this pta.org/grants landing page. So if you're familiar with looking at pta.org/grants, this is really where you can see all of the basic information of what programs we are offering grants for. There will be a short blurb about each program on this page. So this is what the top of the landing page looks like. And then if you scroll down a little bit on the right-hand side, you'll see an apply now button. This is one of the most important pieces. So this is one of the easiest ways that you can actually access the grant application by clicking this button. But I encourage you before you go into the application to actually read through what all the programs are. Maybe you already know what you want to be doing. Maybe you've heard of some of these. We have some that are pretty new, so definitely check it out. Just to give you a high level overview, all of the grants this round are for local PTAs. So the expectation is that anybody applying would be applying on behalf of a local PTA. They are also all $1,000. Part of what we'll be doing, you'll be able to see in the program materials, we make suggestions of how you can use your funds. The breakdown is a little bit different for each program. But the goal is really that the $1,000 will be able to help your PTA overcome some barriers that you might be experiencing in running these programs. So these grants are being awarded on a need basis, meaning that there are barriers that your PTA would face just implementing the programs without funding, and that this would help your PTA be able to meet those needs. The first program on here that you'll see is Family Reading Experience. So if you're familiar with our Family Reading Experience of the past, this is our new and improved version. So definitely click to the webpage to find out more. Mary Lou Anderson Reflections Arts Grant. If you're familiar with the Reflections program, this really helps you run that art programming within your school. Next is the PTA Connected Smart Talk grant. So we are currently in the process of enhancing our Smart Talk program, which is one of our digital citizenship programs, and will really help your PTA work with families and being able to help support them and making some safe online commitments. The next is the STEM and Family Science Festival grants. We currently have 2 STEM grants open. Be sure to check out the programs pages for both to see what is a little bit different. The Science Festival grant focuses specifically on science experiments, whereas this next one, Propelling Our World, is one of our newer programs launched last year, and this focuses more on the engineering design process and STEM activities for families to do together related to that. The final one is one of our newest programs, which is our PTA Healthy Minds grant. So this will really walk your PTA through supporting families in getting resources related to healthy minds or mental health. So check those out, click the Learn More buttons and the website buttons to actually go to the web pages. You'll have to look through those program materials to get a deeper understanding what each program is. Just as a reminder, most important part of this page at the top is that Apply Now button. So what you'll do is you'll click Apply Now, and then you'll be directed to this page. After you click Apply Now, you'll see the landing page for Open Water. Open Water is the grants platform. If you've applied to grants in the last 3 years at National PTA, it will be the same looking grants portal. But there's one key change this year with how you log in. To log in, you're going to click this Login with NPTA button. After you click that, you'll be redirected to a new landing page. You'll either sign in if you already have a login, or you'll create a new profile. What this login is if you're familiar with just pta.org, there is a login for you to access PTA Kit, other membership materials. This will be the same login that you use to do that. If you've applied for grants through the grants platform in the past, it will not be the same login. So what I would suggest is you first start at the top of this sign-in page with any logins you have for pta.org. If you don't have that, then you're just going to click Create a New User Profile. You'll quickly set up a user profile, and then you'll go back in to click that Apply Now button again. So when you're in the system, after you've signed in or created a new profile and then gone back in, you will land on a page that looks like this. You'll see a button that says click here to begin a new submission. That is one of the most important buttons for you to click. After you click that, you're in the system. The system knows that you're applying for grants and you're good. So after you click here to begin a new submission, you'll be in. Excuse me. After you've started an application. So you're going to go in, you're going to check it out, then maybe you're going to go back in the next day as you're working on actually filling out the application. it will look a little bit different. So you'll see something here that says in progress and complete. It will be both here and on the left-hand menu. Make sure to click in progress. If you click start a new submission, that will no longer be there. So just click in progress and then you'll be able to access your application. So with that, when you go to click and start a new submission, or you go back into your in progress application, the first page that you will land on is applicant information. So with that, I will hand it over to Rowena.
Okay, so once you're on this page, it's going to be some standard information that we'll need from you. Your name, first and last, your PTA role, and then it will ask for an email address and phone numbers. These are two very important pieces of information. If we can't reach you at your email address, we'll try to reach you by your phone number. So please make sure that you're providing us with a phone number that's easy to reach you at. The second part of this is to put in your PTA information. There's 3 ways to search for your PTA. You can either do it by your PTA name, your PTA ID, or your city. Once you put those in, your PTA information should auto-populate. If there's any problems with the information that's auto-populating for your PTA, you can go ahead and send an email to membership, provide them with your PTA name and your PTA ID, and the specific issues, and we'll get that sorted out for you.
Rowena, I'm just going to jump in for 1 second on that. If all of you applied to grants in the past, you'll notice that this does look pretty different. The goal is actually to make it easier on all of you so that you don't have to be typing in all this information. And then on our end, it also helps us keep all of the data cleaner. So that if you type a PTA name this year a little bit differently than somebody might type out your PTA name next year, it will still all be connected on our end. And hopefully then you won't have to be tracking down all of this information as part of your application, and it will just populate in there pretty easily.
So along with that, when you put in your PTA information, information about your school's demographic may populate and it may not, depends on the Department of Education has that data. This data does not count against you, but we do really suggest that you look into it as you complete an application. This can be good context for explaining how you're going to reach all the families in your community. So once you've finished your application information or your applicant information, you can switch over to the application. It'll ask you 3 general questions, and then it'll move on to grant specific questions. You are able to click on as many grants as you want, but you should be very careful with the ones that you pick because they are, again, need-based, and it's not very common for PTAs to get more than 1 grant.
Just one thing to add in there too. In past years, we've sometimes had multiple grants open at once. Similar to this, we have found that on average, most PTAs either apply for only 1 or they apply for all of them. So either is fine, but just put some thought into really identifying first what your community's needs are. Think through what type of programming your PTA really needs to be doing, regardless of whether or not you receive this grant funding, and then choose the programs and only the programs that are directly aligned with that. So when you do choose them, to Rowena's point, you'll click on one and then a box like this will pop up. It will have the prompt and it will have the text box for you to fill out. If you click all of them, they'll just appear one under each other.
So once you've finished out filling out the grants that you'd like to apply for, you'll get to the bottom where it'll say save and finalize. If you still want to come back and work on your application, you should hit save. That'll give you the ability to log back in and change whatever you need to. If you were completely done with your application and you're ready for it to go to the judges, you can hit save and finalize. Once you hit save and finalize, it's going to take you to this screen. And once you hit OK, the application is no longer able to be accessed by you. And then another good resource to look for when you're applying is looking at the rubric. This is the exact rubric that the judges will be looking at when they're judging your applications. And you can find this rubric on the homepage and the landing page of Open Water.
Sorry, trying to unmute myself. I believe in last spring, those grants that we had open, we also made the rubric available, but we haven't done this every grant cycle. So I would certainly encourage you to really take this seriously this way. There isn't any wondering, there's full transparency. This is exactly what we'll be handing to judges and training judges on looking at your applications with this lens. So sooner rather than later, I'd really encourage you to not only look over the application fields, but also look over this rubric. And if you have questions about what a question is really trying to get at, ask us sooner rather than later so that we're able to really support you through that process. All right. So speaking of asking us questions, I'm sure a lot of you have questions that you already have. I see one question that's already populated in the chat pod. So feel free to keep adding questions that you have to the chat pod or unmute yourself and ask us any questions.
And to get us started with the question and answer portion, we do have a few questions that we have already been receiving. So we'll just go through those first. First question is, can I receive a grant if I've won a grant in the past? And the answer to that is for the same program, no. So if you won a grant for a specific program last year or in previous years, you won't be able to get a grant for that same program this year. But if it is for a different program within the same initiative, then you're still eligible to apply for and receive that grant. And another question, who should I contact if I need help? Make sure to talk to other PTA members and to your school administration if your questions are related to program implementation within your specific community. But if you do have questions about the application or how to run the National PTA program, email grants@pta.org. I will personally be monitoring this inbox along with my other colleagues on this training.
While we wait for those questions to come in, I just wanted to briefly go over some next steps. So what happens after you submit? The National PTA judges will be reviewing your applications and they'll be using that exact rubric that we've provided to you. Grantees and non-grantees will be notified during the week of October 25th. If you have any questions while you're filling out your applications, please feel free to reach out to grants@pta.org. And just a deadline reminder is that the deadline to apply for these are September 27th at 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time.
All right, and I see a few questions coming in on the chat, so I will read them out loud. Does a council follow the same procedure to apply for the grants?
That's a great question. Thank you for bringing that one up. Because all of these grants are for local PTAs, if you are a council leader, we do ask that you identify the specific local PTA that you will be applying on behalf of, and that you work with that PTA leader to complete the grant application. So when you go in, the PTA that you should be associated with for completing this application should not be your council PTA, it should be the local PTA. So you can work with the local PTA leader to figure out who should be actually filling out the application. I would encourage you to consider supporting that leader and going through the process in a grants portal and doing that. Or if you are the one filling out the application, that you do it collaboratively. So it can be the local PTA's information in the system.
Great, thanks. Another question, if we were part of a pilot group for one of the grants last year, can we apply for the actual grant this year?
Yeah, that's a great clarification. So pilot grant is a little bit different, so you can still apply even if you were a pilot in the past.
Another few questions. Will additional grants be released at other times during the year?
Yes, there will be other grants coming in the near-ish future, and we'll have more information for that when we have dates that they will be opening up on pta.org/grants.
Great. And then we have a few other questions about the count relating back to the council question. Are there going to be grants coming up for councils? And also, could councils help multiple local units?
Yeah, those are great questions. So we do not have currently have any grants open for councils directly. But in terms of a council helping multiple units, I'd really just, yes, that's completely fine. If you are just an awesome council leader and you want to be supporting multiple local PTAs through this process, I think that's really great. But that brings me back to my earlier point about being really intentional how you are filling out the application. So there should be a separate application for each local PTA. So as a council leader, you will have your information within the grant system, but you should really be working with that local leader to fill out the individual applications. If you have additional questions about the best way to manage that process, feel free to email us and we can walk you through that a little bit more.
Great. For the Healthy Minds program, is there an example of a school-wide survey on family mental health available somewhere from the pilot programs?
That is great. First of all, I love that you have gone through that one pager and really honed in on what the specific aspects of that program are. So major win on that front. In terms of the school-wide survey, that will actually be up on the website within the next couple weeks. If you send us an email, I'm happy to share that with you. But one note in particular with the Healthy Minds program and that school-wide survey, we have a standard survey, but the goal is really that we'll be working with you to customize that for your local needs. So for instance, if your school is already collecting mental health data, we don't want you to be duplicative and be collecting the same data. So we have some key questions, but it will really be up to you to customize that.
Great. Will we have a toolkit similar to what was provided for the School of Excellence opportunity to help with the writing for grants?
So in terms of tools for writing and structuring the grant applications itself, it really is using that rubric and then asking us any questions. So that's really the best process. I would say to use. School of Excellence is a little bit different since the grant and the program itself is much more robust for that one. So we don't have a toolkit for the applications as much as we have that rubric for you.
Great. Is the STEM science grant open for Texas PTA?
That's a great question. So you can see in the Bayer Science Festivals list, it will list out key areas. So this is for all of you. Go ahead and read the description for the STEM and Family Science Festival to see if it applies to your specific area.
Would new grants be for the rest of national PTA programs or the same programs?
Oh, that's a really good question. So in terms of the number of grants for each of these, that is really set for this year. So we only have X number of Science Festival grants and all of those are open now. Future grants that we'll launch will be for different programs.
Great. And then if we are selected as a grant participant, is there a time frame for when the grant needs to be completed by?
Other awesome question. So all of these programs will go through the middle of May. We will work with you. You will be working really closely with our team members and with some of your other peers who have also received grants who are just doing these programs in a cohort. So you'll be meeting regularly with them, talking through the best timing for you to be implementing these programs. But the goal is really that these will be implemented throughout the course of the school year, wrapping up by the middle of May, so that then you are able to turn in all of your forms and your data collection to us that are required as part of your grants by the end of May.
Great, thank you. Are there any other questions? It looks like we've gotten through all of them in the chat. Feel free, oh, okay. How can state PTA leaders help national and local units in program implementation?
Yeah, that's a great question. So as state PTA, I think you're situated in a really wonderful spot to be able to support all of the PTAs, not just who are receiving these grants, but also who are running our programs. We have done a lot in the last year to make all of our programs more accessible. So all of our programs are available in different models, both in school and at home, so that the PTAs can really choose the right programs to meet the needs of their communities. So at the state PTA level, I would really encourage PTAs to check out all of the different program models as well as all of the different programs themselves. In terms of more depth and ways to support, if you want to send us an email, we have some additional materials that we can send you at the state PTA level as well.
Great. How can PTAs find out if they have won grants in the past for programs?
Yeah, that's a great question. Email us. That's honestly going to be the easiest way. If you aren't aware if you've won a grant, then just send us an email and we'll be able to tell you if you've won a grant in the last couple of years and if it would make you ineligible.
Okay. And just to reiterate, I see a question about the deadline. The deadline for this round of grants is September 27th at 8 p.m. Eastern, 5 p.m. Pacific, and that is a hard deadline. Another question we got, in some of the descriptions, it does talk about shared hands-on events, and some schools this year are not allowing in-person events or gatherings. Does that mean that these grants are not for that school, or are there other ways that these schools can participate and get these grants?
Yeah, great question. So whereas in the past, the way that we've talked about the shared hands-on events have been all families within a school building, right? Well, that's what we moved away from. But we still have that family engagement component as part of all this. So all these programs have that family engagement hands-on component, but that might mean within family units within their own homes. So it is not necessarily all together in the school building.
And just to reiterate a question we received, so if your PTA has won a grant for a specific program, you are not eligible to get a grant this year for that same program, but you are eligible to apply for other grants. So that is that. So you still are eligible to receive some funding, just has to be for a different program. Right. Any other questions? And also feel free to unmute yourself and ask us. We are happy to have this be more conversational as well. Okay, so if our PTA has 3 schools, does that mean we can apply 3 times? When they receive School of Excellence, they applied individually for 3 schools. Should they do the same here or just apply once?
So I'm assuming if you're saying your PTA has schools that you would be at the local PTA level. So you can send us an email and we can work with you individually. But if your PTA is supporting each individual local PTA and applying, in that case, then yes, you should be submitting separate applications in collaboration with the local leaders at each of the local PTAs. But I want to make sure we're correctly addressing the way that you worded that question. So do send us an email and we can get back to you on that.
Great. And just a clarifying question about the STEM grants. There are 2 different grants. So if a PTA got the Bayer grant, could they apply for the Propelling Our World grant this year?
Good question. So that's probably the one that is most confusing. So this is when we talk about our programs in a couple of different ways. We have initiatives. So those are sort of like the topic areas, right? So we have STEM and Families is the overarching umbrella that we have. Within STEM and Families, there's the Science Festival grant and there's the Propelling Our World grant. Those are 2 separate ones. So if you received a Science Festival grant in the past, you are still eligible to receive a Propelling Our World grant, even though they both fall within the STEM and Families umbrella.
Great. Another question, is every grant need-based only? One PTA is trying to start some new programming, but may not meet all of the need-based criteria and are wondering if they should still apply.
Yeah, that's a great question. So I'd love to actually talk to you probably individually a little bit more about that. All of these grants are need-based though, so we will be prioritizing PTAs who are able to articulate in your applications why this funding is going to enable you to run programming that you otherwise would not be able to run. So perhaps that's because you wouldn't have access to all the same supplies. Perhaps it's because you need funding to be able to get materials or content translated that otherwise wouldn't be able to. Maybe you need to be able to distribute content to families who are participating from home, and you don't have the capacity to do that otherwise. So really think through A, what your community's needs are, and then B, if there's any barriers that are present. That said, the goal of these grants is not to say if you don't have need, then we won't be supporting you in doing this programming. It's just that the financial need won't be there for you. So that won't be a top priority for us in giving out these grants. But what we will be doing, and quite frankly, what we will be doing better at national PTAs than we've done in the past, is still supporting your PTAs and running this programming. So please do let us know if you are planning to run this programming, even if you aren't applying for or receiving a grant. You can still be part of regular touch points with national PTA staff. You'll still be part of a cohort with other PTAs, either who do have grant funding or who don't and are working on this programming. So if you're trying to start something new, that is awesome. We're still here to support, and you can still be part of the process.
Great. Any other questions, thoughts? Give folks a few minutes. Okay, any last questions? Okay, another question. If you attended this training, do we need to attend the training on 9/23? And no, you do not need to attend the training on September 23rd unless you have more questions that you would like answered. We will be going over very similar materials and just answering questions. So if you would like to attend, you're more than welcome to, but it will be a repeat of most of this. Okay, can we go over again what will be offered for PTAs who do not have a need basis for grant funding?
Yeah, absolutely. So I rambled on a little bit with my answer, so let me try to say this a little bit more succinctly. Your PTA will receive all the support from national PTA. And if you let us know that you are running one of our programs, you will be able to still be in a cohort with other PTAs who are also working on that programming. So typically, if you received a grant in the past, PTAs are gathered together. National PTA staff will support you in implementing your program, and you'll have monthly or some sort of regular touch base with other PTAs doing the same program. If you do not have a need for the financial support that the grant would be giving you, you can still participate in all of the rest of it. So essentially, let us know if you're running a program but aren't going to be using a grant, and you can be connected to everything. Truly, what the need base for the grant is just the financial support. The rest of the support will be available regardless.
Great. Another question about being need-based. So if a PTA's funds are currently all allocated in the approved budget, would that make them eligible? So in other words, without the funding, they would have to wait until next year for the programs to be considered for inclusion in the budget.
So we don't see your unique PTA budgets, right? So I would think a little bit beyond just the specific dollar spend of what you are already planning to do with your program. So if you feel like you are already able to implement a really effective program that will reach all families in your school community, then you are correct that wouldn't you wouldn't have the need for the financial funding. But if, for instance, you've allocated just enough funding to be able to implement a part of a program or programming that would only reach maybe the same audience that you've always reached in the past, but you want to add on to your programming to be able to reach new families and be more equitable. If you have another component that you do need financial support for, you would still be eligible. But our goal is really just to be able to help PTAs who genuinely wouldn't already be able to implement that effective programming again in an equitable manner for all families without the funding.
Great. And how do PTAs who are not participating in the grant funding but are hosting programs, how would they reach us? What's the best way?
You can actually email us still at the grants emails with grants@pta.org. We will put you on your list. And as we get further into this fall with pulling those cohorts together, we will certainly include you. But in the meantime, we'll connect you with the manager who's running that program in our team who can support you with any additional programs, questions that you have related to that. You all know this now because you're on this training and you're super on top of things. We will be doing a lot more promotion on the national level as well for PTAs in general who want to be running some of our programming and want that additional support. So we'll be sharing more about that later too.
All right. Any other questions? Feel free to throw them in the chat or unmute yourself.
We can also plan to stay on for the next 5 minutes if there's no other questions, in case anybody wants to hop off. And if anybody wants to answer or just ask us a question with fewer folks on, we'll hang around for a little bit.
Thank you all.
Well, thank you everyone for attending. And as Rachel mentioned, the National PTA team will be hanging out for a few more minutes. But again, thank you for joining.
Thank you.